Hello everyone, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Joel Parks, and I work for Grape City as Widgemo's Junior Product Manager. As a member of Widgemo's team, I assist in the management of our web-based component library, where we develop controls such as data grids, charts, and input controls for the major web frameworks. Today, I'm going to be talking about CollectionViews and how you can use them to manage your layout specifications inside of your Angular applications. If you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to me on Twitter, or you can email me at joel.parks@grapecity.com, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. So, what is a collection view? Well, to put it simply, a collection view is a class that is designed to take in a collection of data, such as an array of objects, and provide you with different features that allow you to manage and manipulate not just the data, but your users' interactions with said data. Some of these features that collection views provide are things like grouping, sorting, filtering, and navigation, as well as other methods and events that can be fired when your users interact with components that use a collection view as a data source. Now you may say, why would I need a collection view? I can write my own functions as well as use the array's built-in functions to handle my layout management. And you wouldn't be wrong. However, you are giving up a lot of functionality as well as increasing your own workload by handling your data management and manipulation on your own. Like I had mentioned previously, collection views come with a host of built-in methods and events that make it easier to handle changes in your data, but a collection view will also automatically update your view whenever it detects changes in your data. It also allows you to synchronize your data across multiple components by using the same collection view as their data source, and is designed to be able to handle collections of data with hundreds of thousands of objects easily and quickly. Now, if you've worked in other environments or with other languages before, you may have come across other collection view classes. Apple's UI Kit has a UI collection view class, Xamarin's Xamarin.Forms has a collection view class for mobile, and Microsoft's .NET platform also has a collection view class for building desktop applications. Collection views exist within the Angular environment, but it seems they haven't caught on yet in popularity. Today, I'm going to be showing you how you can use a collection view to both manage your data and layout, as well as allow your users to manipulate the data that they see. To do that, we'll be using Widgemo's collection view class. Now, before I go any further, Widgemo's collection view class is entirely free to use, so you'll be able to implement this with whatever controls you're currently working with and take advantage of the functionality that it offers. Now that that's out of the way, let's take a look at some of the features that the collection view has to offer. Hello everyone, my name is Joel Parks, and today I'm going to be talking about collection views and how you can use them to manage your layout specifications inside of your Angular application. If you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to me on Twitter, or you can email me at joel.parks@grapecity.com, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. So, what is a collection view? Well, to put it simply, a collection view is a class that is designed to take in a collection of data, such as an array of objects, and provide you with different features that allow you to manage and manipulate not just the data, but your users' interactions with said data, as well as the layout of the application that's using that data. Some of these features that collection views provide are things like grouping, sorting, filtering, and navigation, as well as other methods and events that can be fired when your users interact with components that use a collection view as a data source. Now you may say, why would I need a collection view? I can write my own functions and methods, as well as use the array's built-in functions to handle my layout management, and you wouldn't be wrong. However, you are giving up a lot of functionality, as well as increasing your own workload by handling your data management and manipulation on your own. Like I had mentioned previously, collection views come with a host of built-in methods and events that make it easier to handle changes in your data, but a collection view will also automatically update your view whenever it detects changes in your data. It also allows you to synchronize your data across multiple components by using the same collection view as their data sources, and is designed to be able to handle collections of data with hundreds of thousands of objects easily and quickly. Now, if you've worked in other environments or with other languages before, you may have come across other collection view classes. Apple's UI Kit has a UI collection view class. Xamarin's Xamarin.Forms has a collection view class for mobile. And Microsoft's .NET platform has a CollectionView class for building desktop applications. CollectionViews exist within the Angular environment, but it seems they haven't caught on in popularity yet. Today, I'm going to be showing you how you can use a collection view to both manage your data and layout, as well as allow your users to manipulate the data that they see. To do that, we'll be using Widgemo's collection view class. Now, before I go any further, Widgemo's collection view class is entirely free to use, so you'll be able to implement it with whatever components you're currently working with and take advantage of the functionality that it offers. Now that that's out of the way, let's take a look at some of the features that the collection view has to offer. Alright, now I've gone ahead and taken the liberty of setting up an Angular application and opening that up in VS Code. So what I'm going to do now is walk you through what I've done to set up this application so that it's ready to take advantage of using Widgemo's CollectionView class. Now the first thing I did was I made sure to install Widgemo's core module, which can be done by running this command down here. All it is npm install @grapecity/Widgemo. That will only install Widgemo's core module, which is the only thing that you need to take advantage of Widgemo's CollectionView class. Now once that's imported, you can see here I've created an import statement, import star as wjc core from @grapecity/Widgemo. Now what that's going to do is allow us to use this wjc core method to initialize any classes that are a part of that core module of Widgemo. You can also see here that there's another import statement regarding a data service. We are also implementing this tData item. Now if we hop over to our data services file here, you can see that this tData item is a type, and it's got a couple of properties which we've defined what values those properties are going to be holding, or what types of values those properties are going to be holding. Now that'll get used a little bit later when we get back to filtering. I just want to touch on that very briefly now. We'll go a little bit more in depth when we get to the filtering section. Now we are also exporting our data service, and part of that data service is this getObjectData method. Now this method takes a count as an argument, and it will run through a for loop as many times as the count argument that we've provided says, and it will generate that many items of data. And we're going to use those items of data to actually store those inside of our collection view and allow our collection view to manage. So now we'll come over to our app.component.css file. There's just a little bit of styling that I've done here. It's not important to the application. I just want to point this out because it's going to be a little bit of styling to make our table a little bit easier to read. Now one last thing. Inside of our app.modules.ts file, I've also imported the forms module. We're going to use that for things like ng4 as well as some two-way bindings here in a little bit. So now that all that's covered, we can actually get into implementing our collection view here. So what we're going to do is come over to our app.component.ts file, and we're going to create a new variable. We'll call that CV, and that's going to be our collection view. So we'll go wjc core.collectionView. Now we actually need to initialize this collection view, which we'll use our data service to do. So inside of our constructor, that'll be this.cv equals new wjc core.collectionView. And inside, our collection view actually takes a couple different arguments. The first is the data source, and the second is some options that you can use to define how the collection view is responds to things or is set up. For the purposes of this first example here, we're just going to be setting the collection of data. So that'll be this data service .getObjectData, and we'll request 10 objects from our data source. Next, we need to hop over to our app.component.html file, and what we're going to do here is we're going to set up our table that we're going to use to actually display our data. So we'll need to set up our table. We'll need a row here with some headers. Now we're going to create 4 of these. If we hop over to the data.service file, as you can see here, we have an ID property, a country property, a sales property, and a revenue property. So we'll have a couple different columns here. We've got ID. Our second will be country. Our third will be sales, and our final one will be revenue. Now we are going to create another row here, but except this time, instead of defining it like this, we're going to actually use an ng-for loop to iterate through our collection view and display each object of data inside of our table. Now to do that, we'll need an ng-for loop, and that'll be let item of cv.items. So our collection view holds and manipulates a collection of data. The final version of that collection is stored in the cv.items property that returns an array that stores the objects in our collection. So we can actually iterate through that in order to display each individual data object. So what we need to do for that is we will need to set it up so that this row, or that each row, uses those properties that we define in our data service. So for the first one, that will be item.id, and we can actually just copy this here, bring this down, into each column. So the first one was ID, second one will be country, third will be sales, and the final one will be revenue. Alright, so we should be able to save all these files and let our application recompile. Alright, everything looks good. So now we are going to hop back over to our application here. And as you can see, we are loading in our 10 data objects, and we are displaying them inside of our table using our CollectionView.items array. So the next thing that we are going to get into here is actually sorting our application. Alright, so now our collection view is set up and our table is displaying our array of data. The next thing that we want to do is we want to give users the ability to sort the collection view either by ascending or descending order, in this case based on the ID column. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through and we're going to set up a couple buttons that will allow users to click and sort the ID column by ascending or descending value. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is actually implement those buttons. So we'll have a button here which we will call sort sending, and we will have a click event tied to this. And we will tie this to a function which we will call sort ascending. We are also going to copy this and duplicate it. We will have a sort descending button, and that will call the function sort descending. Alright, so the next thing is we're actually going to hop over to our app.component.ts file here, and we're going to implement those functions. So the first one is sort ascending. Alright, so now inside of this, all we're going to need to do is set the sort description of our collection view. So the first thing that we're going to do is, if there is any sort description that already exists on our collection view, we're going to want to remove that. So that's going to be this.cv.sort descriptions. Now sort descriptions is an array that holds our sort descriptions that we are applying on our collection view. Since it's an array, we have access to the .clear function. So that will just clear out our sort descriptions array and make it so that we are no longer applying any sorting to our collection view. The next thing that we'll want to do is actually push a new sort description that we create onto our sort descriptions array. That will force the collection view to go through and update the view with the new sort description. So in order to do that, it's going to be this.cv.sort descriptions, and since it's an array, we have access to things like the push method. So we can go push new wjc core dot sort description, since we're creating a new sort description, and the sort description takes two arguments: the property, which will be a string value, and that is the binding of the column that we're going to use to sort, and then an ascending variable, which is just a Boolean, where we return true if it is sorting by ascending, and false if we want to sort by descending. So since we are doing the since we're sorting by the ID column, the binding for that is ID. And since this is the sort ascending method, we do want to sort by ascending, so that'll be true. All right. Next, we will create our sort descending method, which is going to be almost identical to this. Change this to sort descending. Same thing. We're going to clear our sort descriptions array. But this time, instead of sorting by ascending and passing true, we're going to pass false into here. So these are our two methods that we'll use to sort by either ascending or descending value when a user clicks on a button. So we should be able to save all of these and our application compiles successfully. So now we can hop back over to our CollectionView application. And as you can see here, we have this sort ascending and sort descending buttons now. So if we click on sort descending, you can see that the table is now getting sorted in descending order based on the ID column, with 9 being at the top and 0 being at the bottom. Now if we click by sort ascending, you can see that 0 goes back to the top of the list, and the object with 9 as its ID goes back down to the bottom of the list. Now you may be saying that's great, but I want a little bit more ability to let my users decide what they're going to sort. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to go through and implement sorting whenever a user clicks on a column header. So first thing that we're going to do is we're going to hop over to our app.component.html file, and we've got our column headers up here at the top. So what we're going to do is we're going to tie a click event to each of those. And whenever a user clicks on one of those, we want to call our method that will actually sort based on the header that was clicked. So here we'll call a method and we'll name it sort, and we'll pass ID since the user had clicked on the ID column. One other thing we're going to do is we're going to implement a little bit of styling here. We want to let users know that, hey, whenever you hover over this, you can actually click this element and it will do something. So what we're going to do is we're going to implement a style, and we'll call that cursor, and we'll set it to pointer. Now whenever a user hovers over the element, their cursor will change to a pointer, signifying that, hey, you can click on this element. And we will duplicate that across all of our headers here. And we will be sure to change the value that we pass through, so that's country. We now want sales and revenue. Alright, so now whenever a user clicks on any of these column headers, it will call our sort method and pass through the appropriate argument. So now what we're going to do is we're going to hop over to our app.component.html file here, and we're going to implement our sort method that we want to call. So for that, we'll have sort, and we will pass in a value that we expect to be a string. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to check and see if the sort description, the length of the sort description array is 0. If it is 0, then we know that there's currently no sort description set, and we can just push the current sort description that we have. So it's going to be if this.cv.sortDescriptions.length, because it is an array, we can use .length, equals 0. Then that's just going to be this.cv. Actually, let me just copy this from up here. So it'll be this.cv.sortDescriptions.push. And that is going to be, instead of saying ID here, we're actually going to say value, since we're passing the value that we want to sort by into the method. And we'll set that to true because we want to just automatically sort by ascending on the first click. Now we will need to create an else statement, because there will be times where we do currently have a sort description on our sort descriptions array. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to check and see if the sort description that we have applied is currently applied on the column that we just clicked. So that's going to be if this.cv.sortDescriptions 0, since it's an array and we only expect there to be one element on it. We can get the first element by passing 0. Dot property. Now this dot property is the bound value to our sort description. So if we click on the ID column, the property is going to be equivalent to ID. If we click on the country column, it'll be equal to country, and so on and so forth. So we just want to check and see if that is equal to the value that we just clicked on. Now if it is, we are going to create this new variable. We'll call it ascend description, and we'll set that equal to this.cv.sortDescriptions 0.ascending. Now this .ascending, like I had mentioned previously, is just a Boolean value, so we will either get true or false back from this. The next thing that we'll do is we will need to clear our sort description like we'd done previously. So we'll just copy this and move this down to here. So now our sort description is empty, but we do have the Boolean value of the sort description that was on there. And then finally here, what we're going to do is, and we can copy this line up here, is we're going to actually flip the sort that we have going on the column that we clicked. Now since we clicked on the same column that was already being sorted, we want to, if it was being sorted by ascending, we want to sort it by descending value, and if it's sorted by descending, we want to sort it by ascending value. So what we're going to do here is this is going to be not ascend description. That way, if it's true, it'll now pass in false, and if it's false, it'll now pass in true. Alright, now there's one more thing that we'll need to do, and that is if we are currently sorting by one column and the user clicks on another column, we'll want to clear the sort description of the original column and apply the sort description of the new column. Now all we need to do for that is clear our sort descriptions array and then pass a new sort description. Now this time it'll be value. And since we want to automatically sort by ascending value if it's the first time it's been clicked, we'll set that to true. Alright, so now that that's all done, we should be able to save our application here, save all, and expect it to compile successfully, which it does. Now we can hop over to our collection view that we are displaying, and as you can see, if we hover over these column headers, you can see our cursor changes to a pointer. If we click on ID, nothing happens because by default we want to sort by ascending value. We'll click on it again. As you can see, it changes to descending value. If we click a third time, it goes back to ascending value. Now just to show you that it works on the other columns, for country, we'll click on that. As you can see, it goes China, France, India, Japan, US. If we click again, you can see the order is flipped, and now it shows US, Japan, India, France, and China. And that's how you go about implementing sorting based on users clicking on each individual column of their array. Alright, so now our users can sort their collection view and their table either by clicking on a button or by clicking on each individual column header to sort by specific columns. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to give our users the ability to actually filter their collection view based on a value that they enter along with a specific column. So what we're going to do is we're going to implement filtering for the country column so that whenever the user types a country name, it'll filter the collection view and only display countries whose values contain matching strings to what the user had entered. So the first thing we're going to do is inside of our app.component.html file, we're going to implement our input control here. So the first thing is we'll just put a label, and we're going to use that to label our input. So that'll be country filter. And then we are going to implement our input control here. So that'll be input. Now we're going to use an ng model here, so that'll be ng model, and we will set that equal to filter input. So we'll need to create a variable called filter input, and then we are going to attach an event here, which will be ng model change. and we'll set this equal to a method, and this method will fire whenever the ng model for this element changes. So that will be, we'll call that filter collection view. Pass an event here. All right. So we've got our input control, and we'll also add a little break here, just so it makes it a little bit more readable. So we've got our input control here. The next thing that we need to do is actually both implement that that variable that we're tying to this control with ng module, as well as the filter collection view method that we've created here. So what we'll do is we'll come back to our TS file here, and we'll create a new variable. We'll call that filter input, and that will be a string, and its current value is just empty. Next, we will come down here, and we'll create our filter collection view, and we expect a string value to come through that. Alright, so now we are going to implement a callback method with the CollectionView filter property. So that's going to be this.cv.filter, and the filter gets or sets a callback method to be called whenever to determine if an item is suitable to be included whenever the filter goes off. And our argument is going to be item t data item, which is that type that we created inside of our data service. Now inside here, what we're going to do is we're going to return, and all this is going to do is return a Boolean value here. So that's going to be value, the value that we get. And then we're going to check against item dot country dot to lowercase dot index of value. So now all this is doing is going through the country property of each object and seeing if the string that the user has entered exists anywhere on that country value. All right. So now that we've got this implemented, we should be good to go, so that whenever a user types inside of that input value, our collection view will automatically filter the values out that do not have matching text equal to that. So we'll go ahead and we'll click Save All. Our application compiles correctly. All right, perfect. So we're good to swap over to our collection view. All right, and as you can see here, this country filter now exists. Alright, so we will start, so since we have a couple values here, and it searches the entire string, we're going to try searching by IN, and we should expect to see both India and China remain inside of the table, while the rest of the values get filtered out. So we'll type IN here, and as you can see, India and China, both still being displayed, while the others are filtered out. Just to test a little bit more, we can see France is here, so we'll try that. France works good. Alright, and Japan. Alright, Japan shows up correctly. Alright, and that's how you go about implementing a filter to allow users to filter out data that they don't want to see from your collection view. So far, we've managed to successfully implement both sorting, whether that be on a button click or a column header click, as well as filtering onto our collection view. The next thing that we're going to implement is paging and navigation. Now, in a lot of real-world applications, you're not just going to have 10 data objects being returned to you and displaying those very neatly in a table. You may have hundreds, if not thousands, of values that are getting returned that you need to display. And in situations like that, typically what you want to do is, instead of having all of them display at once and make the page very large and bloated, what you want to do is allow users to page through the data so that they only see small snapshots of the data. It keeps the page running a little bit faster, and it lightens the load a little bit. So what we're going to do first is we are going to hop over to our app.component.html file. And we're going to implement a little menu here that we can use to actually allow the users to navigate all of this data. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is I'm actually going to want to display what page the users are currently on. So we'll put a little break here just to make it a little bit more legible. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put a span here. And inside the span, we'll say page, and then that'll be cv.pageindex plus 1. Now, cv.pageindex returns the current page index that that the collection view is on. And since it's an array, the first value in that's going to be 0, but users aren't on page 0, they're on page 1, so we're going to add 1 to that so that it properly matches up. And then that'll be of cv.page_count. And page count just returns the total number of pages that are available. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a couple buttons here. This first one is going to be first page. So when users click on this one, they go to the first page. And we're going to add an event to this, specifically the click event. So whenever a user clicks the button, it will fire off this method, and that will be the change page method. And to that, we will pass the argument first, and then I'll just let it know that the users want to go to the first page on our collection view. So now we'll duplicate this down 4 times here because we're going to have 4 buttons in this menu. So the first will be first page. We will have previous page, which will just take the user back to the previous page they were on. Next page, so that if a user clicks this button, it will take them to the next page. And then finally, last page. So if the user clicks this button, it will automatically jump to the last page. And we'll update the values that we're passing in. So previous, next, and last. And now we can hop over to our app.component.ts file where we will actually do some implementing and implement this change page function. So come down here to the bottom, and we'll implement change page here. We're expecting a value of type string. All right. So we're going to create a couple of if statements here, and that's just going to be used to determine which function of the collection view gets called. Because the nice thing about using a collection view is that you don't actually need to implement the logic to transition the users to the first page. There's a method that will automatically do that for you. Now, what that's going to be is an if statement, and that's going to be if value equals previous. Actually, it'll be value equals first. And that's just going to call this.cv.move to first page. And that will automatically just take the collection view and have it move to the very first index in the page count. All right. Next is we'll have a an else if statement, and that'll be if value equals previous. And if the value equals previous, about as simple as before, it'll be this.cv.move to previous page, and that'll just take us right back to the previous page. And we're going to duplicate this for the last 2 buttons here. So if it equals next, be this.cv.move to next page, and we'll fix this here. And finally, it'll be this.cv.move to last page. Alright, so now we've got this implemented. The final step is to actually implement paging at a base level on our collection view. So for something like this, we will return, we'll say, 1,000 data objects here. Now, if you remember earlier, I said that the collection view actually can take multiple arguments here. So next, we are going to pass in a object, and this is actually our contains a set of options that the collection view will use to modify itself to whatever you're specifying here. So for page size, it's very simple. The property name is just page size, and this takes an integer which determines how many objects are displayed per page. So in our example, let's say we want to display 20 objects per page here. Now we should be good here to go File, Save All, and this should compile successfully. Alright, cool. Next we can hop back over to our application. And we will actually very quickly just make one little change here. We'll add another break after this. Just clean it up a little bit. And that'll recompile successfully. We can hop back over here. So as you can see here, it currently says we are on page 1 of 50. Now if we hit next page, as you can see, we're on page 2 of 50 and it's displaying the next 20 values. If we hit previous page, it will go back to the previous page we were on, in this case first page. Now if we hit last page, we should expect to see the last 20 values inside of our collection of data, which would be, I believe, objects 980 through 999. So hit last page. As you can see, it displays the objects that we expected to see here. And then finally, if we go back to first page, and it's displaying the first page of values that we have inside of our collection view. So that's how you go through the process of implementing paging on your collection view. Alright, so the next feature of the collection view that I'm going to go over is the grouping functionality. Now what the grouping functionality does, and in our example it's going to look very similar to sorting, because you're essentially sorting and it'll go by, country, so US, France, Germany, etc. And it'll have all of those in in their order. With grouping, you can get a little bit more out of that. Specifically, what I mean by that is the number of elements inside each grouping. So, for example, if you had a list of 1,000 elements and you were grouping by the country column, and you had, say 50 countries with the value of US, you can actually display that there are 50 items inside of your data collection that are grouped under the country United States or US. So what we're going to do here is the first thing that we're going to need to do is create a couple buttons, and those will actually be used to group and clear the grouping. So we'll create a button here, and this will be group by country. And then we'll create another button, and that will be clear grouping. Now we're going to need to tie some events to both of these. So that when a user actually clicks them, we'll have an event fired. The first one will be group by country is the method that we'll call. And for our clear grouping, that we will just call clear grouping. At the end of this, we will put another break just so it lines up nicely with our table. Alright, the next thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to hop back over to our app.component.ts file. Actually, before we do that, we're going to want to create a little div here. Now what we're going to do, since this is just a standard HTML table, you can't appropriately show the viewings without a little bit more code. So for simplicity's sake, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an unordered list here. And what this unordered list is going to do is be populated by list elements that we generate to display the number of grouped values. So we will attach the tag grouped items to it and give it an ID of grouped items. Alright, so now that that's done, we can hop over to our app.component.ts file here, and what we're going to do is, since we put a tag on the unordered list of grouped items, we will use viewChild to actually get that unordered list, so grouped items, and we will call it grouped items. And that is of type element ref. Alright, so now that we've got that, we can actually jump down to the bottom of our page here and implement the methods that get called whenever a user clicks on the button. So the first thing is group by country. Alright, so now inside of this we are going to apply our new grouping, and then after we've applied our grouping we will go through and generate the list of items so that we can actually display how many items of each are grouped. Now the grouping process and applying that group description is very similar to the process of setting your sort description. If you remember, like I said a little bit ago, the sort and the grouping are fairly similar. It's just that grouping gives you a little bit more access to information. So we're going to create a, well actually we don't need to create anything in this instance. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually just push, since our group description, since we don't have any groupings going on, our group descriptions array is empty. So all we have to do is push a new group description onto our group descriptions array. To do that, that's pretty straightforward. It is this.cv.group descriptions .push because it's an array, so we can just push to add a new element onto that, and that's going to be new wjc core.property group description. And inside that, it takes an argument. It can actually take several, but we're only going to provide it one. In this instance, it's just going to be the binding of the column that we are going to be grouping. So in this case, that would be country, since we want to group by country. Alright, and regarding actually applying that grouping, it's really just that simple. Now our country column, whenever a user clicks that button, will get grouped. However, in our example, it's just going to look essentially identical to sorting. So to show you what you can really do with it, I'm going to go on now and implement the dynamic list so that those list items will get generated. That's pretty straightforward. We're just going to create a loop that will go through the groups of our collection view here. And then inside this, what we're going to do, seems I missed something there. What we're going to do is simply create elements and push them onto our unordered list in order to be displayed. So we will create a variable here, and we'll call this li, and that'll be, we actually need to implement our renderer here. And this will allow us to actually dynamically render those elements onto the page. So we'll be using, let's see, we'll call this a renderer. And this will be from renderer2. So now I'll come back down here, and that'll be let li equals this dot renderer. Here we go. So this dot renderer dot create element, and we want to create a list item here. And then we'll do const text, and this will be the text that we display inside of that element. Will be this.renderer.create text. That'll be this.cv.groups and then the name. So that'll be the name in this case. If we're sorting by country, that'll be U.S., China, India, Japan, etc. And then we want to display how many elements are actually inside, or how many elements of that type are being grouped here. So that'll be this.cv.groups .items.length. I believe -1 here is what we'll want. Actually, no, we don't need to -1 that. Plus, and then items. Alright, so this is our, so we've created our list element, or our list item. We've created the text that goes inside of that. The next thing that we're going to need to do is actually push this onto our unordered list. So that's pretty straightforward to do. It's just this.render.append child, and then list item and text. So now our list item has its appropriate text. And then the final thing we need to do is actually append it to our unordered list. So that's going to be this dot grouped items dot native element, and then li here. Alright, so that will both apply our grouping and then create our list of elements and display to our users what is being grouped. The next thing that we're going to need to do is actually clear our groupings. That's also pretty straightforward. So our method was called clear grouping. Now in this, pretty straightforward, this.cv.groupDescriptions.clear. And that will remove our group description and make it so that our collection view is no longer grouping by the property that we passed it. Now the other thing that we'll need to do is we'll need to actually go over our unordered list and remove that so that the users are no longer seeing it, because obviously we're no longer grouping anymore. That's also pretty straightforward. So we'll create this new variable, we'll call it group node, and we will set that equal to this dot grouped items dot native element, and then while grouped node dot first child. And all this does is while the group node has a first child that exists, we're going to come in and go grouped node dot remove child, and we will set that to grouped node dot last child. Now that'll go through, and as long as the grouped node has a child, it'll go through and remove the last element of that grouped node list. So we should be good to save all here, and as we see, our application compiles successfully. Now we can hop back over to our collection view. So now you can see here there's this grouped by country and clear groupings button. If you go ahead and click the grouped by country, as you can see here, we're currently displaying, showing that there are 20 items grouped by Japan. Now the one thing is, we have 1,000 items inside of this collection view. So as you can see, that it only shows groupings based on the current the current viewport of the collection view. So in this case, the current viewport consists of 20 items, so it's showing that Japan is encompassing all of the grouping. What we can do, and I'll do this to give you a little bit of a better example, is we'll come back here, we will remove our page size here. Actually, yeah, we will remove our page size here. And what we'll do is we'll set the get object data back to 100. So we should be good to file, save, and this should go through and compile correctly. Awesome. So now we can hop back over to our collection view application. As you can see here, we've got now 100 different items in our collection view, and we will click group by country. So as you can see here, now it's giving us a little bit more information. So you can see out of our collection view and all of the items, we've got 25 items that have the country of India, 15 that have the country of Japan, 21 that have the country of US, 22 for China, and 17 for France. And then if we come in here and click clear grouping, as you can see, the grouping goes away. Our collection view is set back to its default state, and our elements that we dynamically generated to put into our unordered list are now gone. So that's how you go through the process of implementing grouping with your collection view. Alright, now the last thing that I'm going to go over is to show you how you can allow users to add their own data to your collection view and both update the collection view itself as well as the view. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to hop over to our app.component.html file, and we are going to create our own little input form here that we will use to actually get data from our users. So we'll create this h4 tag, and we'll just say add new data, and then we're going to create a couple labels and inputs down beneath that. So first we'll create our label, and that will be for country, and we'll create an input here, and we're going to use ng model to tie it to a variable inside of our TypeScript file, and we will call that variable country input. And then for clarity's sake, we'll put a break here so that it's not all lining up on a single line. All right, and we're going to need two more, one for sales and one for revenue. And you may be saying, you know, hey, why don't we need one for ID? Well, we will automatically generate that ID based on the last item in the collection based on its ID value. So we're not going to implement that here. So we'll need one for revenue. All right, so now we have sales input and revenue input. All right, and one last thing we'll need is we will need to implement a button here to actually add our data. So we'll say add data, and we'll put a break at the end of that. Finally, we will tie an event to our add data button here, and we will just call the method add data. All right, so now we've got all of our code implemented inside of our markup. The next thing that we will need to do is hop over to our app.component.ts file here, and we're going to create those variables that we had tied to ng model in the HTML file, and then we will implement our add data function that will get called whenever the user clicks add data. So first we got country input, that is of type string, and its current value is blank. Same with we need sales and revenue. So sales input and revenue input. All right, so those will hold the values of our input controls from our HTML file. So we'll hop down to the bottom here, and now we will implement our add data method. Now, adding data is actually extremely straightforward with the collection view, and it's done using the add new function and the commit new function. Now, what the add new function does is it creates an object that is identical to the objects that are being stored inside of your data collection. And then what you can do is you can set the values of those properties and then commit that to the collection view. It will then go through, add that new data, and will update the view for you. So we will create a variable, and we'll just call this new item. And we'll set that equal to this.cv.add_new. All right, so now that that's done, we can actually just go into this new item, and it has all the same properties as our other data objects that are inside of our collection. So an ID property, a country property, a sales property, and a revenue property. So we'll set new item.id equal to this.cv.total item count, which just returns the total number of objects in the array, -1, because since the array starts at index 0, our ID count starts at index 0, so we want to make sure that we're not skipping over an ID value here. Next will be new item.country, and that will get set to this.country input. New item.sales will get set to plus this.sales input. Now, the reason that we are putting a plus here is because sales input is being accepted as a string when the sales property is actually a number, so we want to convert that over into a number. We're not doing any validation in this application. We're just going to assume that the users are inputting valid data into the input controls. And then finally, new item.revenue will get set to plus this.revenue input. Finally, we need to commit those changes, so that'll be this.cv.commitNew. All right, so now that all that's done, we should be good. To just come in here and click Save All. Our application should save and compile correctly, which it does. Awesome. So we can now hop back over to our collection view, And actually, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop back over to our VS Code here just to make it a little bit easier for us to view. We'll come back up to the top and we will re-implement paging. So let's see. We'll say page size, and we'll set that to 10. Alright, so we can go ahead and save that. Our application will save. And we can hop back over, and as you can see, it's now displaying 10 items here. You can see page 1 of 10. Alright, so the next thing we're going to want to do is actually add our new data. So first, the country, so we'll say Canada for our country, and then we will put in a numeric value for sales and another numeric value for revenue, and we will click Add Data. Alright, and now as you can see in our view itself, nothing has changed. No new data has been added. But if you look down at our page, our paging controls here, you can see it now says displaying page 1 of 11. We have 100 items inside of our collection and we're displaying 10 to a page. So theoretically we should only have 10 pages. But as you can see, when the new item gets added, it requires a new page to get added and it updates our paging controls. So now if we jump to the last page, we should see the new data object that we had just created and added to our collection view. And as you can see, the ID is now 100. We'll move to the previous page and see the old maximum value of ID was 99. So move back. As you can see, the ID is 100. The country is Canada. We've got our sales value and our revenue value matching what we put in here, which is exactly what we expected to see. And that's how you go about implementing adding new data and allowing users to add their own data to your collection view. And that will about wrap it up for this workshop on collection views and how you can use them to both manage your collections of data as well as how they can be used to automatically update your application's views. Hopefully you've managed to pick something up, and I hope you all give the CollectionView class, whether they be Widgemo's CollectionView class or another one of the CollectionView classes available for Angular, a chance so that you can see how much easier it makes managing collections and views. If you're interested in giving Widgemo's CollectionView, which is the one that I used in this workshop, a try, we've got an API page that you can find over on our API website. So that would be grapesy.com/widgemo/APIs/classes. And this CollectionView class page will give you all of the properties, all of the methods, and all of the events that developers have access to when working with the CollectionView. Thanks for coming to the workshop, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.